What matters and what does not when it comes to character concerns? Niners meeting with a whole bunch of defensive linemen. What can we learn from those meetings? All that and more draft notes coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you as always at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every sinking day. We love our everydayers and we appreciate all the new listeners as well. Make sure you are subscribed. It's okay if you pause right now. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. In today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Little teaser, it's going to be a defensive lineman, Croc, because the 49ers clearly interested in some defensive linemen. Some of the guys the 49ers are bringing in for visits, Croc, I think it is to vet their character. And now that Dane Brugler's beast is out with some background information, some clarity on some of these prospects, there's the Bob McGinn articles, and he does those every year. He talks to a lot of anonymous scouts and executives, and there's some dirt, and there's some I think some really bad scouts out there. I find it funny. So Tyleik Williams is one of the prospects the 49ers have brought in. No character concerns that I know of with Tyleik Williams, big kind of nose tackle prospect that we both liked when we put on the tape, Croc. And in Bob McGinn's article, there is one scout that talks about him. Oh, yeah, true nose tackle, really good run stuffer, this and that, talks about his strengths and weaknesses. Then there's a second scout that's like, oh, clearly 3 technique, and starts talking about his strengths and weaknesses. I'm like, one of these dudes has to be fired because you are bad at your job if you are that off from what reality is, right? In these two different scenarios of what a prospect is, because it's not that hard when you're watching a prospect to find out what a guy is. And I know which one we think this guy is. And one of those scouts is way off. And I wish I knew who he was or what team he scouted for, because dude should be handed his papers because he's not good at his job.
I think you'd be surprised with the scouts and just how they get in there. Like, there's a lot of, I think it's kind of thrown out there with like guys like Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan and the Kubiak hires and all that, where there's a little bit of nepotism. And
a lot of it.
It's the same for these scouts too. I don't know how they vet guys or women, because there are some women scouts out there, but essentially scouts, some of them, they're just not very good at it. And I don't think everybody knows exactly what they're looking for. So they have some things that's, there for people to kind of learn and be a tool. The Scouting Academy. And I actually took the Scouting Academy. I paid for it. I think it's a great course, but still there's a part of it there's like this feel for a prospect and what they are and what they are. And you can evaluate a prospect and it not work out and your evaluation actually be right. But there's other reasons why it didn't work out. Maybe not understanding the player's personality. Maybe the player just didn't work as hard when they got to the NFL or work the same as they did to get to this point, right? Like, there's some things that are a little bit out of your control, but identifying what the prospect is, that part isn't hard. You just don't know sometimes if it's going to hinder them going to the next level. A guy like Richard Sherman, he wasn't the fastest guy. I bet they had a lot of, terrific ball skills, played on the other side of the ball. He's a long rangey guy, maybe, does well in zone, but man, he's not that fast, right? Like, and so they got the evaluation probably right, but maybe they didn't know exactly how it's going to carry over to the NFL level. Same with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, if you look at his scouting report, it's pretty spot on.
It's right. Yeah.
He's kind of this burly quarterback, likes to play in rhythm, would thrive more in a play action passing offense that relies more on timing and rhythm over having a big arm, right? They got the evaluation right. It was when he got taken, and you never know, hey, are there some other things that this guy has that's going to make it to where those things aren't an issue? And clearly Brock has. He's made it to where he's like, dude, like, yeah, I don't got the biggest arm, but man, I do these things so well that whatever limitations I have physically, I can kind of overcome that. The mental part of things, being a leader, having a lot of experience, right? Taking those things into account. So it's interesting with scouts. Typically, they do a good job with that, but sometimes when you just like don't get the right position for a certain guy, that's the part that gets a little weird.
Absolutely. I believe this is your guy, Rob Louder, Lieutenant Sipplejack in the chat.
Yeah, shout out to my guy Rob.
He brings up a great quote from George Carlin. Fantastic. He says, quote, "Somewhere out there is the worst doctor in the world, and someone has an appointment to see him tomorrow." So yeah, that scout might be in your building, and you hope it's not the team that you root for that is employing that scout. So let's go to the character stuff, Croc. And I'm going to read through some of the reports for some of these guys. And I think some of the big ones are some that the San Francisco 49ers have brought in, and they're doing their vetting process. And look, I've been a hiring manager before, and I know I've sat across from the table from someone. I don't know anything about their past. I don't know if they've been arrested for something, but I sat across from them for 10 minutes in an interview and was like, I don't want to work with that person every day. And I didn't hire him, right? So I can imagine what it's like for, a 50-year-old executive to sit across from a 22-year-old kid and be like, oh my God, this guy, I don't know what to do with him, right? And not want him in the building. But that's the difficult part is the human element of it is way more difficult than the football aspect of it and the height, weight, speed, and what style of player a guy is. So when it comes to, I'm going to start with Mike Green, because he's one of the best pure pass rushers in this draft, defensive end out of Marshall, and how he ended up at Marshall's a crucial part of all of this. And so I'm going to go to Brugler's Beast for this one because he's got a little bit more clarity on what the situation is for Mike Green, and then we can kind of make our.
Hold on, Peacock. Real quick, I have a question before we get into that.
Yeah.
How much does character matter to NFL teams?
I think it matters a lot depending on what it is. Because some guys are weirdos. You think about like wide receivers, right? Like Terrell Owens, you might have some character concerns there, but he was one of the all-time greats. Randy Moss was a weirdo sometimes. You go Antonio Brown, you go Tyreek Hill, right?
Well, first of all, hold on.
What are you gonna look past? Was that
receivers? I think they're known to be divas a little bit.
You almost wanted you got to be a little bit off to be a great receiver because you have to grind out every play like you're going to get the ball, but you're only going to get the ball 8 times out of 40 routes or whatever, right? So I think you have to be wired a certain way. And I think DBs are kind of in that same group a little bit as well.
Yeah. But linemen though, right? Like Jalen Carter. He had some off-field stuff and it started to look a little crazy, and he's kind of fleeing the scene of a crash that, people lost their lives in, and there were some other things going on with him. It was like, well, the Eagles were like, well, we'll still take him top 10.
Yeah, and it's like, well, we got some of his buddies from Georgia to keep him in line.
Were his issues too rich for like 3rd or 4th overall? And again, I don't remember how that draft board fell, but were there teams that were like, oh, we really like him, but man, because of these issues, if we're picking at 8, we would take him, but picking at 3, can't do it. Like what? Because picking a player is still top 10, picking them at 8 or 9, and he has kind of these red flags. It's
with Jalen Carter, I think
big swing.
The situation with Jalen Carter was teams would have taken him based on talent, and they didn't. So basically, they took him off their board, at least with their first round pick. He would have gone top 5 probably. So it was too rich for those teams. The Eagles were in a situation where they had extra picks, felt like they had some Georgia teammates, they could keep them in line. And they felt okay with it. So that's like a per team basis. And I think that's kind of what it might be for someone like Mike Green, where if you're uncomfortable with it, you're just not going to draft him, right? It doesn't matter if it's 13 or 11 or 4 or 21, right? You're just not going to draft them unless it's, he gets so far down the list where you're like, well, he's in the 3rd round now. We kind of have to take a chance on him and maybe we'll draft him now. Or maybe you wouldn't even still then and he just wouldn't be on your draft board anymore. But what is
and that's like Honey Badger, right? Like when the Honey Badger.
Right. And he felt quite a bit.
Everybody knew he was a great player, but, he had the marijuana stuff going on and he slid to the 3rd round.
Great point by Cynthia. Got burned by Reuben Foster. And that was an interesting player because if you're doing weird stuff and you're not available for your football team, well, it's the ultimate red flag. And it's the ultimate character concern that you can't even play the sport for your team, right? Obviously, there's a couple of great examples of guys who were really mostly hurting themselves, like Josh Gordon. Would Josh Gordon even be would he have even been suspended in this day and age in the NFL for some of his substance problems, right?
Yeah, because I don't think it was just marijuana.
There was
I think
more
he
to
had
it. Yeah.
some hardcore stuff going on.
Yeah, I think there's maybe some nose candy involved and some other things like that. I don't want to overstep. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was more than just alcohol, but alcohol was a big part of it. And then we saw firsthand Aldon Smith, right? And how awesome he was, but how short that career was because of problems off the field. So it absolutely matters, and it's going to impact whether you get a guy who's good at all, available at all, or maybe he's good and then just gives you headaches. Maybe he ruins your locker room. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go. And so that's why I want to talk about some of these, and we can kind of go through this with the information we have and be like, yeah, is this something that you think you would want to mess with? Because there can be football character, which is they don't care about the sport and they won't try hard, so they're not going to maximize what they are. And then there's off-field character, and there's, literal criminals potentially as well, where it's like Ray Caruth. It's like, okay, that goes a certain direction, right? That's the ultimate one. What's his name over there in
Hey, Ray Caruth just got out of jail too. Like,
did he get out of jail?
He's out.
Wow.
But his son, it's not a great situation. The kid lived.
The kid, yeah. Oh my God. That's one of the worst ever, right there. And obviously, what's his name, tight end over there in New England, who didn't make it out of prison, is another one. So there's a lot of different types of character issues, right? Yeah, some kickers clearly, even if kickers can have some character problems, the league doesn't care that much. So which things do we care about? Let's get into some of these, and we do have some information from anonymous scouts, from journalists alike. Aaron Hernandez, thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of his name. That was a bad situation there. You don't want those on your football team. Let's put it that way. So let's talk about some of the character concerns and what we know about some of the prospects. And the 49ers might be picking from some of these guys in the first round and are bringing them in and vetting them right now for a very good reason. Let's talk about that next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Nissan and the all-new Nissan Armada, our player of the week. I want to drop that name in a second. Each week we're talking about a new draft prospect, and it's one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe that showcases strength and power needed to push the 49ers forward as we look ahead to next season. And this week's Armada and clear-cut player of the week is Tyleik Williams. And he was in, I believe, Wednesday, for a private workout with the San Francisco 49ers, one of the 30 visits. And Croc, when it comes to Tyleik Williams, heavy duty, rugged, conquers the road with capability and confidence. Dream big and go big. I mean, this is a big man, 330 pounds. I don't know if there's any prospect that's more perfect for the Armada player of the week than Tyleik Williams. And this ad read's gonna go a little long because I want to add some Tyleik Williams scouting report to it, Croc, for our listeners. Tyleik Williams, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this about Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. There is no prospect in this 2025 NFL draft, no singular one player can help a team's run defense more than Tyleik Williams. So if you want to get better defending the run, Tyleik Williams is the pick for your football team. Monster inside. The Nissan Armada, it's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can with the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the outstanding vehicles like the Nissan Armada, the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder. Go find your next big adventure. Take those for a ride. Shop NissanUSA.com. Yeah, so Tyleik Williams, Ohio State defensive tackle, he's one of the players the 49ers have brought in. I don't think it's character concerns that they're worried about with him. But I found it interesting, Croc, that the 49ers list of defensive tackles that they brought in on 30 visits, Tyleik Williams, until he was one of the later names that's come out. And clearly they need defensive tackles. But the other guys they brought in were all sub 300 pounders, like 3 technique pass rusher types. and all weighed in less than 300 pounds at the combine. Walter Nolen, TJ Sanders from South Carolina, and Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. So I thought that was interesting. And then I saw big Tyleek Williams name in there, and I was like, okay, cool. They're still looking for some nose tackles, because we've been talking about that. It's like the Niners need to stop the run first before you start worrying about who's rushing the passer on third down, right? So Tyleek Williams is one of the players I do like for the San Francisco 49ers there in round 2. But as far as the character concerns go, let's start with Mike Green, a player the 49ers have had on a 30 visit, defensive end out of Marshall. And here's one that I think matters a lot to the 49ers, matters a lot to NFL teams, because there's allegations of sexual assault here with him. And so here, let me bring up the exact. So Green signed as the 7th ranked recruit for Bronco Mendenhall's class at the University of Virginia. And he was suspended entering his second season because of a sexual assault allegation, and then left the program. Charlottesville police suspended the investigation into the alleged incident. Green denied the allegations at his combine press conference. Green entered the transfer portal then in December of 2022, joined Marshall in the spring of 2023, then had 17 sacks for Marshall. They tried to throw some NIL money at him to stay one more year at Marshall, but he decided to forego his senior season, accepted a Senior Bowl invitation as well on his way to the NFL draft here in 2025. But here's the most worrisome part for me, I think, Croc, is that there was that he was kind of like a there's no second chances. There's one chance only when he got to Virginia, because of an incident from high school. And I want to get the wording of this right, from high school. And let me go down here in the Beast again. Brugler's Beast is awesome. Let's see. So 3-star recruit, ranked 109th wide receiver, by the way, in high school in 2021 recruiting class. And the number 15 recruit in the state of Virginia. He received his first Division I offer after his junior season from Boston College. Goes on to talk about Pitt and UMass and Virginia Tech and Kansas State, App State, and a bunch of conferences. And then some SEC offers from Kentucky and Ole Miss as well. But he connected with the coaches and culture at Virginia and committed in 2020. So there was an allegation from high school, and then there was the Virginia thing. So that's 2 allegations, Croc. No charges ever for Mike Green, but that's the worrisome part for me. Sexual assault allegations, no charges. He's been forthright. He said he didn't do anything wrong. But man, 1 allegation, something weird could happen. 2 allegations, Croc?
That's one of those where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah. That it's that the 2 allegations, and they're a while ago, no charges, but still, it's like, man, that might be one where it's like, okay, you just have to pass maybe on that. So I think that one's serious enough. And again, multiple allegations. Like, I've seen some people try to talk about Deshaun Watson. 29 allegations or whatever it is. It's like, dude, come on. Come on, man. So look, that's that. I want to go to James Pearce next, Croc. This is an interesting one for me. And James Pearce, it's more about how much does he love the game and will he work? Here's James Pearce from an anonymous scout. This is according to Bob McKinn's articles. Pearce, quote, Pearce belongs in the top 3 edge rushers, but the mental part, the personality part, is what I would say pushes him down. You knew at the combine he would put on that show, and he did. He did not disappoint. He probably goes after Williams, Carter, and Stewart, but it will probably be a successful team that will feel like they can take him on. At Tennessee, he was literally a no-go. You ask somebody there, hey, if you had a chance to come to the league, would you bring this guy with you? And they're like, absolutely not. That's crazy, right? That this scout says that the folks at Tennessee said that if they could go to the league, they wouldn't even take him with them. And apparently he was, the team would be working out and he'd be just chilling in his apartment. You would look at him on the sideline and he's 20 yards away from anybody all by himself. That's the James Pearce thing. There's no charges. There's no, no trouble with the law or anything, but he might just not care enough. And
Yeah. Now that's a red flag. You know,
Right.
and the allegation thing, like Trip Aces says in the chat, allegations are not convictions. So maybe somebody can look at that and be like, okay, maybe I can give them a pass. You can talk yourself out of that. I don't know if I can talk myself into drafting a player. Again, I don't want a player that has allegations, but I definitely can't talk myself into draft a player that people at the school say they wouldn't bring with them to the NFL. Like that is
Yeah.
allegations are worrisome. This is big time worrisome as well because that's just somebody like you don't care. Like with the allegations things, there could be now I'm not giving this guy a benefit of doubt, but there could be some misunderstandings somehow, some way. There ain't no misunderstanding with them going to people at your program and saying, "Would you bring him with you?" And multiple people are saying, "Absolutely not." Yeah, that's hard. Now, can he get to the NFL, get around somebody that has a great work ethic, and him just see like, okay, this is how I have to work, and I have to prepare this way, cool. But if they haven't had that mindset to this point and and never clicks, that's tough. You know, ESPN, they were showing uh gosh, why am I blanking on Ryan Coogler. So Ryan Coogler, he's the director for like Black Panther. He, you know, did like Creed 1, Creed 2, Fruitvale Station. He's directed a lot of movies. Well, he played at Sacramento State. He played football at Sac State before he transferred to USC for the uh, master's program in art and theater and all that. All right, but anyways, he talked about showing up at Sac State and seeing a guy by the name of Otis Amy. Now I know Otis Amy personally because I was around Sac State during those times too. And he's a pastor at the church I go to. But he talked about seeing Otis and how Otis worked and saying, well, that's how it's supposed to look. Let me copy and follow what Otis does. Let me follow what Otis did, right? Like he took that in and was like, I want to be like that. And he said he took that for the rest of his career with everything he does, including writing scripts for movies and whatnot. Pearce, I don't think he's that person that's going to say, look at how hard Otis Amy works. Let me be like Otis Amy. He's like, I see how he works. I don't care. I'm going to try to win off athleticism. And that's it.
And that's the way he plays too. He kind of coasts off his ridiculous speed and athleticism. You think, man, this guy couldn't bulk up a little bit, get 250 pounds. Doesn't show a variety of moves. You know, he's a good football player, but you know, when you hear stuff like that, it's like, okay, is he not going to maximize who he is? Next is another pretty important one because he's a player we both like, Croc, and would be on our list of players to draft to pick number 11. It's Walter Nolen, defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. And then if we have time, we'll get into the chat a little bit as well, talking NFL draft next. Walter Nolen, another player the San Francisco 49ers have had in on a 30 visit, and a super talented guy. He was one of the players that, you know, he should be playing 3-tech, but he was taking on double teams and playing almost like a nose and shade in college and letting other people do the dirty work. And he was up to the challenge and taking on double teams and was still, you know, getting into the backfield. And he's a twitched up athlete. He was even a better recruit than Travis Hunter was. They were the 1 and 2 recruits coming out of school a few years ago. And I think number 3 in that same class was Luther Burden. So it was a pretty phenomenal recruiting class in whatever it was, 2022. So here's the quote from some anonymous scout or executive in the NFL to Bob Ginn in his Bob Ginn article at Bob McGinn. He does this every single year and has all the great juicy anonymous scout quotes. And again, some of these scouts are not great either, and they need to be vetted themselves. But here is one of the quotes on Walter Nolen. And tell me what you think here compared to some of the other stuff we talked about. Quote, he'd probably be at the top of the list if you could just not see him between plays, between drills, between meetings, one scout said. Quote, this kid has been paid at 5 different schools, 3 high schools and 2 colleges. He's a mercenary. He's probably the biggest mercenary in this whole draft. He has followed the money everywhere, but yet is a very quiet and shy kid. You would totally think disinterested. You wouldn't think he's hearing a word the coaches are saying to him. But when the ball is snapped for 4 seconds at a time, he's really talented, really gifted. He is explosive, good with his hands, gives effort, But between drills, between snaps, he's on his own program. Some D-line coach is going to stand on the table and say, oh, no, I can coach this guy because he's so talented. Organizational support is probably an understatement. So that is the quote on Walter Nolen. The 5 schools in 6 years thing is kind of interesting to me. On one hand, you could argue that like this dude's been a professional since he's 15 years old. Like he knows he's going to be under contract in the NFL. No NIL money can take you away from that. The disinterested part and not working, it starts to sound a little bit like the James Pearce stuff as well. So is he not going to maximize the type of player he could be? But he's got a motor between snaps. And Croc, that's the stuff we see. And we're like that coach that the scout is talking about. We're like, man, yeah, give me that guy. I could work with that because we see him for the 4 seconds in between the snaps. I don't hang around with him all the rest of the time. Being shy, that's fine. I don't care about that. You got some vocal leaders. I don't care if he's shy. Does it mean a lot to him? Is he going to work? Is he a bad person? Bad character? Him taking money for a while. I mean, there's a lot of college players who've been taking money for a long time, NIL or not. 5 schools in 6 years, a bit much, maybe. I don't know.
It's a bit much, but if he was just being a, what do they call it? Capitalism, a capitalist.
Capitalist,
like
yeah.
If he's just
capitalizing on his
capitalizing
situation.
on an opportunity to make more money at a time where like most of these guys, I mean, dude, my kids, I had them today. I'm coaching high school football, and I had to go pick up pizza for these kids because they barely eat anything. So I bet a lot of these kids would love to be able to pay for their own pizza and have a little extra money, right? Now they're not Walter Nolen talented, not yet, but I don't see anything wrong with that, chasing the money a little bit, because all these programs and everything, they're capitalizing off of you. Not so much high school, but definitely at the collegiate level. They're making a lot of money depending on how good you are. So that part doesn't bother me as much, but the kind of does his own thing. In between snaps, not knowing what you're going to get, or in between drills, maybe he just needs that legit veteran around him. The coach for Ole Miss, I'm gonna blank on his name.
Lane Kiffin.
Kiffin.
Yeah.
Maybe he just doesn't care about those things, and he's like, look, I just want to win games. Because he's kind of a firecracker a little bit as well. So maybe just with Nolan, it's a certain type of personality he's gonna have to get coached by. That's not gonna care as much as long as he's getting the job done.
Oh, dude, yeah. Lane Kiffin's entire defensive line at Ole Miss, I think, was the best defensive line NIL could buy. I think all of them were transfers for some big NIL money there. Yeah, so I don't know. Again, like the Walter Nolen one is the most vague and it's pretty unspecific. But like when you start talking about character concerns, there's personal character, there's football character, and I think they both matter. Are you gonna poison the well and screw up the entire locker room because you're such a bad person? People don't like being around you. You're gonna suck out the energy. Are you just gonna not work and maximize the type of player you are? Because that's probably something you don't want to draft and don't want to draft high and spend a lot of resources on. Are you like literally doing stuff off the field that is bad for society and could get you, could get charges placed on you? And like that's serious stuff as well. So, yeah, man, character does matter. I think it's really important. And then you look at the San Francisco 49ers, and someone brought up Reuben Foster earlier. And it's like, man, you think about all the hits the 49ers have had, George Kittle and Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner and Brock Purdy. And it's like, what's the thing they really hit on? Man, they hit on the character on those guys. So it's the human element. It's the hardest thing to get a handle on. And just because you don't have any of these weird anonymous reports doesn't mean that you are squeaky clean either. But will the 49ers lean a little bit more towards some of the prospects that might feel a little safer because they really are convinced on the character, and they're convinced that a guy that maybe production wasn't quite there, but they do meet some height, weight, speed measurables, and they believe in the character of the player to maximize what they're going to be and be a part of the program? Is it worth bypassing a more talented player to draft that player? And I think in a lot of times it probably is. But I think some of the character stuff is a little overrated with some of these guys too. What's the Saban quote, Croc, on Reuben Foster?
He said, if you're looking for a candy striper,
yeah,
he's not. And again, I still don't even know what the hell that means, but he's not your guy. Like if you're looking for a choir boy, he may not be it. But if you want a hell of a football player, he's that. And I think we got to experience both sides of that with Reuben Foster being a part of the 49ers organization.
No doubt. And we've seen both sides of that on multiple occasions with San Francisco 49ers players over the years. So yeah, it's each individual situation. The hardest part in scouting all of this isn't what you see on the field. I mean, that stuff's easy. And Croc, we come with these players, and we come back after watching some film of guys, and we usually have nearly identical scout reports a lot of times on some of these prospects. Sometimes we differ a little bit, argue about some stuff, and some nuance to it, and what we see here with this guy. What can he be? But the human element is the much more difficult thing to figure out. And then there's medical, and then there's fit too. You could really love a player, but it's like, it doesn't quite fit the scheme that well. So is it even the right fit? And then so if you take all this character stuff really seriously, maybe those guys aren't on your board. Again, it starts to dwindle, right? It starts to really dwindle. So ask yourself this and let us know what you think at BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Drop a comment on YouTube. Who are the players that check all of the boxes for you, or at least most of the boxes? Like, who's a player who meets a physical prototype or close to it for the San Francisco 49ers at a certain position? Potentially, we're talking like first round guys, right? Maybe second round guys too, if you got some. Who are the players that have the height, weight, speed? Who are the players that are clean off the field? There's no concerns about, get high character reports reportedly. And the players that really start to and have some production and some physical ability that you could project more production to in the NFL. Like, they could be a high level starter based on what they've done already in college and what they could be with what their physical ability is. Like, who starts to check a lot of boxes? And I think you might start to dwindle down a few names. And that's why I've started to point to a few guys where I might think they're more likely for the San Francisco 49ers at pick number 11. I would like to hear what you guys think about that. At BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Drop a comment on YouTube, subscribe while you're there. And of course, you can find us anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And Croc and I, we're gonna start looking at some more prospects. We're under 2 weeks to the NFL draft, guys. So there's a lot more prospects we got to look at, especially some of the early round guys. Niners have 4 picks in the top 100. It is going to be a lot of fun. So hang out with us here every day as we break down the draft and post-draft right here. Locked On 49ers.